Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chatz, a television podcast. Last week, you heard the very last episode of Sunset Chatz. We're sad to see it go, but today I'm excited to take you on the first step of the journey of Season 11. Season 11 is going to be similar to last summer's Season 8 in that it's going to consist of 3 mini-series that we're going to string together as kind of mini-seasons that each make up part of the larger season, Season 11. Now, Season 8 was kind of themed around it being Chat's summer school type of thing. Season 11 is we don't know yet what the common theme is, but there's something here and we're going to figure it out as we go. It's kind of reflections after a year of pandemic, but also Vanity Fair is in there too, kind of thing. But yeah, we'll figure it out as we go. This episode is going to be slightly different than what you're used to hearing on the main feed. Alan and I wanted to give you an introduction to Season 11. So what we did is we took all of the episodes where we piloted the first episodes of these miniseries from over on our Patreon and spliced them together into one single package so that if you're a patron and you heard us pilot these shows a few months ago, you can remind yourselves of what we thought about them. Or if you are not a patron and you want to hear what those discussions sound like, they're here for you in this episode. If you like what you hear today, you like hearing us discuss the first episode of a show, trying to piece together if we want to cover it or not, we're doing that all the time over on patreon.com/chatspot, and you should go over and support us there. It's only $3 a month to get 3 episodes a month. We think that's a pretty sweet deal. Stick around till the very end to get the plugs and time-specific announcements from me. And check the show notes if you want to jump to a specific timestamp in a specific show's discussion. Without further ado, let's kick off Season 11 by talking about the pilot of Vanity Fair.
Be some kind of way out of here, said the joker to the thief. There's too much confusion, I can't get no relief. All alone, watch.
Come on down to PilotChatz. That's where you are. Welcome to it, Alan.
Now come on down to PilotChatz. We'll sing our PilotChatz song. Our PilotChatz. That's our song. And if you don't think that we can sing it faster, then you're wrong. But it'll help if you just sing along. Bum bum bum.
And there's someone on with like a washboard or whatever.
I'm just going to laugh for the entire time that you're doing that, so I suggest you stop so that I can breathe. And so the audio doesn't get fucked up. Hello.
Alan, I'm hearing voices. Whose voice is that? What's going on?
I'm joined by the I don't have one of those funny intro preps for PilotChatz.
Okay.
We're joined by a friend of the podcast, longtime listener, longtime friend. It's old as your omens, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome, Omens, to the podcast. Omens has been listening to the chat since she was a young lass back in Scape Chats in Season 1. And she had guested on 2 episodes of Scape Chats and had also come back for Avatar The Last Chatsbender. And like I said, she's been a pal ever since. So
yeah,
we had to get her in here for this. I definitely appreciated a lot your messages while we were covering Pride and Prejudice about the history of not only the outfits in that series, but like just the culture and the gender politics. So we're glad to have you back for a pilot discussion.
Yes, thank you so much. It is always an absolute joy to listen to y'all, and even if I'm not directly contributing, I'm still here and I'm still trying to listen to I just love I just love talking with y'all. I just do.
I
Like
appreciate
that's and I missed it, and that's the reason I'm here. Honestly, I texted out like, "Hey, can I be on the podcast?" I don't like science fiction very much anymore, except for my favorites. So maybe we can do a period drama.
That's how we ended up here.
That's how we ended up here.
Yeah. So we are, to get us into it, we are going to be talking about 2 miniseries on this episode. The first with Omens, and then we'll come back after the break for the second one. But the first show that we are piloting today is 2018's, I believe it's an Amazon original. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, it is. It's a Prime exclusive.
Prime exclusive Amazon original, Vanity Fair, based on the old-ass book by some old-ass dude named something. I forgot his name. Somebody else should present it.
William Makepeace Thackeray.
1847.
Right. There you go. So yeah, we watched the first episode of Vanity Fair, and what did y'all think of this? Or what's your background maybe first with if you have some knowledge of Vanity Fair or this period of English history or anything like that? What do we bring to the table?
Personally, I am an anthropology and archives student who has always enjoyed museums research and reading old-fashioned magazines for fun. So ever since I was a wee baby, before I knew y'all, I have been doing like historical dress research and looking at old issues of Harper's Bazaar. And you learn some weird stuff when you look at old issues of Harper's Bazaar about the way people behave, but also it just reminds you that people have always been people. And that's my favorite thing about humans. And it's the reason I study them.
That's
or
really
at least
cool.
I'm going to school to do that and maybe get a dumb marketing job.
Realism.
You're going to be one of the people that bums me out writing, slam poems for Coca-Cola or whatever the hell's going on.
Jesus, no.
Probably not. I hope not. But that sounds incredible. And it sounded like from our pre-show conversations, you also just have some familiarity with Vanity Fair, the story and its influence and all that.
Yeah.
Is that true?
And sort of especially the movement in the U.S. that it was the first domestic novel, which is how we get, as I said, most of the literature, as I said before we started recording, most of the literature that shaped my childhood. So like Little Women, The Secret Garden, Anne of Green Gables, like just novels about people and how they behave. It's kind of, Austen was the first to do it, but Thackeray was the first man to do it.
So he was the first to do it, in a way. In the eyes of his contemporaries.
I mean, Austen and Bronte were already doing it. Like Agnes Grey had just come out, which was Anne. Like that same year, they're contemporaries with the Brontes. So this became a thing after Austen, but no one really turned it up to 11 quite like Thackeray did.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I know, like, when you start getting into any sort of domestic literature, you always do come back to Vanity Fair because it's pretty influential, despite, from my little bit of research on the novel, this is very firmly a satire. It seems like there was years and years and years of novels of this type and serial novels of this type about like social climbing and how beautiful it was to like be in England and like travel and go across the world. Like these were, ostensibly cheap novels or cheap serials for young women to buy and to like fantasize about and think about like, oh man, I could have money someday. And eventually a lot of people got really tired of that and were like, what if we kind of in a circuitous way criticized society for idolizing characters like that, and that's how you get to something like a Vanity Fair. I have not read this novel. I'm familiar with it, and I remember researching it a while ago, partly in our discussion of Pride and Prejudice. But I think this specific miniseries was recommended by Austin Walker in the Waypoint discussion of the Pride and Prejudice miniseries. And I just off the cuff like remembered that, and I was like, oh, I heard that was good, and it's like really short. Maybe I'll look into that. But I had not actually experienced any of this story before we watched this pilot.
It really to me feels like Vanity Fair, and I don't know if this is accurate from the historical context that you just gave us, Omens, but it does feel, at least in my mind, like it is a more cynical Pride and Prejudice almost. Like it's kind of poking at. We have the main character, Becky Sharp, and I think we can talk a lot about her. But she seems like a kind of funhouse mirror, cynical version of Elizabeth Bennet a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Or Elizabeth Bennet under different circumstances. I'm curious what we all thought about like Becky Sharp as a protagonist and the sort of main beats of her story and all that.
Becky Sharp as a protagonist, for me at the very least, sort of like actually comes into her like you can see a lot of the Pride and Prejudice influence in the first episode, and then as the novel continues, you see a lot more of like inspiration from things like Jane Eyre or Agnes Grey, governess novels about women going out to service and sort of satirizing those. So the Vanity Fair is in many ways kind of it's poking fun at novels like Pride and Prejudice, but it's also poking fun at contemporary literature that like have become classics, and a lot of which have not. Governess novels were extremely popular. And we have Jane Eyre and we have Agnes Grey still, and those are still read, but there were many, many more of them.
Yeah, the genre maybe has fallen out of fashion overall. Yeah. So the kind of, let me set up maybe the general scope of the plot, and then Alan, I'm curious about your thoughts on that question. But we start at what I guess is like a boarding school for young women or something like that. And
well, we start with the framing device, which is something I definitely want to talk about.
Right, that's true. So
which is William Makepeace Thackeray is being played by this guy. It's like the guy who's supposed to be the writer of the book, being like, check out this thing, check out this shit, you guys.
Yeah.
And it's like a carousel behind him with all the characters of the story like riding on the carousel, and then we zoom in on Becky, and he's like, this is gonna be some wacky stuff. In the novel, I believe this is a puppet show.
A puppet show, that's what I read, yeah.
Which is really fascinating. But then, we go to the girls' school, and Becky's a bit of a miscreant.
Yeah. Can we talk real quick about how stupid it is that the theme song is all along the Watchtower?
Yes.
Like, that really is dumb.
Oh my god.
It's really so bad.
Is it? I hate when they use modern music for period dramas. Because there was popular music of the day that was, like, happening and could be used and good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's especially bad when the song makes no sense for the show whatsoever. Like, what exactly is the theme of Vanity Fair that is highlighted by All Along the Watchtower? It's
not much. It's
really an odd choice. And it's like a sort of sad piano version of it, too. Yeah, weird choice. Anyway, so yeah, we start with that framing device. Then we see Becky Sharp. She's the music teacher at this boarding school, but she's sassy. She gets into so much trouble. She gets fired, and then she goes to live with, for at least a week, one of her former students who, oh my God, the name is Amelia, who also goes by Emmy. And then the bulk of the episode is Becky trying to get Emmy's brother Joss to propose to her so that she can marry him and live in this sort of life of luxury, as opposed to having to go off and be a governess in the house of the old creepy dude at the end of the episode, which ends up happening to her. And even though Joss wants to propose to her, his buddy, handsome guy, freaking, oh my God. Yeah. Is like, no, you can't. And then they have a third friend, too.
Dobbin.
And that's the story of the episode.
Dobbin, it's Johnny Flynn. He's going to be important later.
Yeah, Dobbin's going to be real important later. He becomes a main character later. And things go varyingly for him.
I can imagine.
I just know we have to shout him out because A, he was fantastic in 2020's Emma, and B, our friend Jim really likes Johnny Flynn as an actor and as a musician. Was he in Lovesick? Am I crazy? No.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
he was in Lovesick.
He's the main guy in Lovesick, right?
Great, love Johnny Flynn.
So yeah, let's get back to talking about Becky Sharp. Alan, I'm curious what your take on her as a character is, and sort of her arc in the episode.
Yeah, a lot of my notes in the early goings of this pilot were just about how impressed I was at how they are able to make you, or at least make me, fall in love with Becky Sharp as a character. Because I think anime does this a lot with boys who are, there's like a term for this. It's not necessarily a layabout, but just like a rebel kind of kid who doesn't like to do the rules and likes to be rude to authority and hates adults. But just framing that as, she's at a girls' school and her punishment is that she's going to become a governess, I find really fascinating. And I think tying that into where this story lies historically really, really engendered like a big empathy with me and Becky. I felt like she was immediately my favorite character. This book takes place during this part at least is at the end of the Napoleonic Wars between France and most of the rest of Europe, as I understand it, but mostly England. And you immediately get a sense of like the people who know French and the people who don't know French and where the French influence is coming into England. Is a source of a lot of tension, which I found so fascinating.
Yeah, and I think they do a good job of making that clear. When to a modern audience member, you might be like, "Who cares? She can speak French. Who cares? She has darker hair and slightly darker skin. What's the problem? You're all white European people." But yeah. I think they do a good job of portraying oh no, she's French and or has French ancestry or whatever, and that the soldier guys, I think they shoot that and perform that well to kind of teach you how people perceive her and where they feel she belongs in the sort of social hierarchy of things, which you're saying made me feel sympathetic towards her, to the point where I was confused when she started being manipulative, and kind of shitty, and I was like, wait, no, but you're cool,
but I like you.
What's happening?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
You have stumbled upon the point.
Yeah, right.
And for me, I feel like they do a really, really good job of using the classic tropes of, as you said, of the Austen novels and the things that you know from reading other books, and use them to your disadvantage here. You want Becky Sharp to be the heroine so bad. You want her to be the heroine so bad, but she is a heinous bitch, essentially.
And she knows the tropes of those stories too, I think, right?
Yes.
She knows, if I just play the part and act so impressed by Joss's India stories, even though they're clearly fabricated, if I just pretend they're real, and play the role that is set forth for me by these other stories, then it'll get to the part where he proposes to me. Because she has so many moments where she's like, just say it. Come on. I know you're about to say it. Just say it. And then we're good. And it's happily ever after.
She's doing a Pride and Prejudice speed run.
Right. Exactly.
She's like, we could fight back and forth, and this Joss guy, I don't even need to be attracted to him. Money is all that really matters. I don't want to be a governess. Let me just get this guy. Oh crap, he sucks. Oh, he turbo sucks. Oh no, and things go badly for her even in this pilot, because she's trying to basically flirt with this Joss fellow, who disappointed me, and I think we'll talk about this more in another conversation. But I always am looking for positive portrayals of bad characters in media and constantly disappointed. And I know it's a fool's errand, but I can still hope for things, right? But Joss really bumped me out. Watching this character who comes from good means and initially seems really honorable, and he's right up on there with everyone else of he's also part of the courtship game. He also goes on parties with everyone. And then we get to actual Vanity Fair in the story, and it's this gorgeous series of long shots. And then he just falls apart. He just becomes a nightmare person. He's the mask has fully fallen off, and he just cannot stop indulging in excess and making a fool of himself in front of everyone. It made me very uncomfortable.
But Vanity Fair is in itself meant to be a sort of nightmare void.
Yeah.
There was the whole... And I mean, honestly, Joss is gay. We're just going to lay it out there. He's gay.
He's gay. That seems right.
But who is he? Does he like? Do we know anybody that he has a crush on yet?
No.
Okay. You just got the vibe. You got the radar went off.
No, he has no women that he has a crush on. He is 30 years old. It is.
I forgot that he's 30.
That really doesn't read that he's 30. He doesn't seem 30 at all.
He's just there to party and be belligerent, and he doesn't do too much like explicit flirting. I feel like the scene when he's in the like living area with the living room with Becky, and she's clearly making the moves on him, and he's like, I think
I need to go to my room.
I need to go.
Yeah,
I think you can definitely make that read.
What I really liked about Becky and Joss's shittiness is that the story makes it so clear that their shittiness is the fault of society to a certain extent. Like, Joss becomes so belligerent and insufferable because people's attitudes towards him because of his body shape or whatever have just made him miserable and feel like he's never going to be happy. Like, his friends at one point are like, he's like, there's no one else for me. And Dobbs is like, yeah, right. We know, because you look like that. Right. And you can sort of blame some of his behavior on that. Not all of it, but some of it. And with Becky, she's manipulative, but she has this conversation with Emmy where Emmy's like, oh, it's love that matters, isn't it? So much more than money. And Becky's like, well, it depends on how much you start out with. Like, you can feel that love matters because you're like some rich, pampered young woman. And for me, it's literally like a matter of what kind of life I'm going to have, whether or not I get your brother to marry me. So I thought that was really cool that the show makes clear that like their kind of depravity is a result of just the way that their society is structured.
Yeah, I think also this coming out in 2018 both does it a disservice and adds a lot to the drama of the series because you have like people being petty to each other and misunderstanding tells the way that like a modern drama or a modern like teen drama would work. But you also get moments like Bob Dylan's All Along the Watchtower as a theme song. Yeah. So it's like a double-edged sword that it looks really gorgeous and like the CG is pretty good and all the we'll talk about the outfits, but so some of the outfit work is really good. And it feels like, okay, this is just a modern series. Like, it's pretty accessible as a pilot, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and about the actual coloring of the the set design and the clothes, I was reading a couple of reviews, and I was wondering why it looked so weird. And
it looks super weird.
Everything is oversaturated.
That's modern TV, baby.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that is. I saw that because we also watched Good Lord Bird, and I was like, "Yep, this is just how modern TV looks. It sucks.
Yeah.
I hate it so much."
Everything looks so clean, and I'm like, okay, I understand that this is how this is going to look because this is not a depressing Dickens novel where everyone is living in the dirt.
Yeah, some of these people come from money. Like, her friend Amelia, gorgeous. She has, like, well-kept eyebrows, and I was like, none of this is realistic. This is, like, a pretty young actress that you, like, made up really, really heavily, and then you're like, oh, she's from medium means. She's fine. And I'm like, no, she looks like she's worth $1 million.
Yes.
I think you can make an argument that, like, it being so clean fits with the artifice of it being, like... this kind of like the puppet show thing or the carousel thing, that it's these kind of like, they're almost figurines, the characters. I don't know that it really works because most of the time you're just looking at the screen. Like, I don't like the way that this looks. But I don't know if they were going for that on purpose, but you could say that that's serving that purpose.
You can do that deep read for sure. It's one of the other things I'm really excited about exploring more with this show is the original novel is also notable for having a very unreliable narrator, whether that's Becky or whether that's Thackeray. I think it alternates like who they're referring to, but the way that manifests in the show besides the opening is occasionally Becky will like straight up like spike the lens. She'll just like look directly at the camera.
That was weird.
It's not like
even Fleabag.
Not even just not even in like the Office way where it's like, get it? It's kind of like she's looking past the camera and then like pauses on the camera and then keeps looking past it. And I'm like, wait, no, you can't look at me. I'm in the I'm in the TV.
Yeah.
It feels like she's cracking
Owens is
through
right
the
that
lens.
it feels like Fleabag or like, I don't know, House of Cards or something where it's like, oh, that was unsettling. I didn't know I was here.
Yeah.
It's the reason it's such a big deal in in production. Like, you don't spike the lens because as soon as it happens once, you're like, no, I'm
Like,
in the show now.
What was the purpose of that too? I like, are they going to do that again? Because they only did it one time in the episode.
I don't know.
I caught it a couple times in the episode. I think there's like very brief moments in the. There's only one major one where she's in the house and she looks. But then, like at the very end, because the last like 10 minutes of this pilot happened really fast. Once she is sent to the house and she is becoming a governess, and then she looks down, and I believe that's the other guy, the handsome, shitty man.
Yeah.
The other handsome, shitty man, not that one, but the other one, George. And then she like kind of looks at the camera like, okay, basically she's saying like the game is afoot. And what that part worked for me, both her spiking the lens and that ending, because it's kind of saying like this story is not about like Joss or Amelia or any of that stuff. This is Becky like playing the game. Even when she becomes a governess, even when her whole life has been upended, the game is not done yet, and you're going to be taken along for a ride with her. So that's like what the lens moment at the end felt like to me. We're being invited into her interiority a little bit. Which got me really excited. I was like, oh, I thought I was like done. I thought this was like a pretty like open and shut pilot. And then it's like, oh, no, we're not even close to done. We have a lot of things to do here. I'm curious what her being a governess, like where that frames the story. Because it seems like that's actually the real, like the majority of the book is that.
Yeah, and like how does she see the other characters again? I was like, whoa, okay, so we are going to see the rest of them later, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And her being a governess, just to add a little bit of a historical note, because you asked that question, Alan, like where does this situate her? Governesses are in between people. You're trapped in between stations. You're working, but it was like the only source of income for a woman in semi-genteel poverty. And that's the reason she says when Miss what's the last name of Amelia? Sedley. When Mrs. Sedley asks, hey, essentially like, oh, you're going to be a governess? And is sort of like really haughty about that. Becky's only response is, my family fell on hard times. Because like the only way you would send a semi-genteel woman out to work is as a French mistress. Or like to teach drawing and painting as a governess.
I'm curious about that stuff because you don't see a lot of stories about governance. You like know of governesses in these stories, but then you don't actually like get the story where they are the protagonist that often.
You have Jane Eyre and you have Agnes Grey, which are the two most famous governess novels. And part of what like Agnes Grey and Bronte's like seminal work really shows is that as a governess, you are just trapped in between the working class world and the upper class world. And unless you can either marry out or like it's almost impossible to marry out.
Like what's the escape from that?
There is almost none.
Right.
Good. I just remembered the entire plot of Jane Eyre just flashed into my mind. I suddenly really want to reread or watch an adaptation of Jane Eyre. Yeah. It's good. It's kind of spooky. Oh,
yeah. I read it.
New podcast, Jane Eyre cast. So I want to talk about sort of the overall chatsability of this.
Oh, go ahead. Sure.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
No,
what'd you say?
The curry scene. It's just that was my favorite scene.
Well, yes. If we're to talk about this show more, we can't avoid talking about its relationship to different cultures, not only France but also India.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the soldiers here, especially Joss,
spent time in India.
Yeah, he was stationed in the East India Trading Company and like talks about, he's telling her stories. I love that scene though where they're like sharing lies to each other, where he's like, yeah, I was in India and I like saw an elephant, and she's like, oh, you rode it? And he's like, yeah, I rode it.
You know what? I got in front of it and stopped it from killing people. Yeah.
I was like,
yeah, that's what I did.
And then I mounted it and then I like took it away and I like, what?
And she's like, wow, so cool.
Cooperative lying is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
That's improv, baby.
And the thing is, like, this marriage would be advantageous for both of them, but it's everyone else that's bothering them about it.
Because like his friend, Joss's friend, who's with Amelia, his reason for not wanting Joss to marry Becky, he sort of says like, oh, she's a social climber, she's just loves you for your money, but then his addendum is like, and also I don't want my sister-in-law to be so low-born or whatever. And it's like, okay, dude, so you're not really helping your friend out. You're being kind of a dick. And Dobbs is like, just let him have his fantasy. Just let him do it. What harm could possibly happen as a result of this marriage?
But so you have like, again, their relationship to her being partly of French descent, and then all this India stuff and like there's a moment later where they're at the Vanity Fair, and I believe it's Becky and Joss maybe who see, or maybe it's Amelia and the other guy.
Are you talking about the fortune teller scene?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fraught.
Yeah.
That's something. That's a white guy who's pretending to be Indian, and they have a moment where they're believing him, and they're like, "Oh, I don't think he's actually." They don't say Indian. They say something else.
Hindu.
I don't remember.
Yeah, you're not.
Hindu.
Yeah, you're not meant to believe as a viewer that that's happening, and it's supposed to come off as kind of racist.
Right. No, for sure.
And it's gross, but I feel like the narrative addresses it in a way that is helpful, including all of the sidelong glances at slavery with the black.
I was gonna say it. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's right there. They have this
Glances
character
at colonialism, not slavery, because slavery would have been. Oh wait, slavery was outlawed in Britain in 1808.
England. Yeah.
But still, definitely colonialism.
Yeah, and Sam as the indentured servant who's like, I know I'm supposed to be respectful, but also I hate you.
Yeah. Her relationship with him is worth unpacking more. But I really like the moment where Sam is like in the chamber cleaning up around Mr. and Mrs. Sedley, and they're like, "Ugh, well, she's French, but at least she's not from India. Can you imagine having like mixed race grandchildren? Oh, that would be terrible." And he gives them a look like, "Fuck you guys. What is wrong with you?"
That's the 2018 thing being the 2018 adaptation being good.
Right.
Yeah.
They can address that. So I have no clue how or if that was handled in the original novel. I kind of doubt it. I don't know.
It wasn't.
Unless he becomes like a more important character. But seeing that stuff, I was definitely like, oh, this is great. Because even something like Pride and Prejudice, which like that miniseries is from the 90s, like tiptoes around and dances around anything about like indentured servants or non-white people existing.
Yeah, I think everybody's white in that, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Alan, you wanted to talk about Chat's ability a little bit ago.
Yes.
Well, what do you think about Chat's ability?
6 episodes. No, 7 episodes of Vanity Fair 2018. We could also watch the
Reese Witherspoon movie.
Super curious how that movie is. I actually remember hearing a lot of stuff about that. It's actually what year was that? That was 2004. So it's interesting. Like that's right around the time of the Pride and Prejudice movie, which was 2005. So, film studios were doing a lot of adaptations as films, and I want to watch the series and see like how long it stretches out over. Like, is it over a long period of time? Is it zooming in on a short period of time? Like, what's the scale here?
The timeline of this series is like the actual like of the show.
Yeah.
1814 to 1832.
This is the coolest thing about miniseries, and we're going to talk about this in our second half, but, like, miniseries don't have to give a crap about, like, staying in one season. They're like, no, we got to show a whole person's life in 6 episodes. Here you go.
Yeah.
I love that.
10-year time jump. I don't care.
So that being said, I enjoyed talking to the two of you about period pieces, and there's still so much we could have dug into in this pilot. Like we barely even got to talk about the Vanity Fair itself and what it symbolizes and the hot air balloon and all that stuff. I think this is chatsable. I think this is entirely chatsable.
Yeah, I mean, I think
did I bury the lead too far?
I think we're burying the lead a little bit, and we should just say like we're gonna do it, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
Just say it, and we're gonna have Omens with us, which is gonna be a fucking delight. So that's gonna be great. And we're gonna kick off a series of a season of miniseries coverage with Vanity Fair, which I think is gonna be really fun. And I will be honest, I was a little not so hot on it after I finished the pilot, but talking to both of you about it, it's like, oh, okay, this is actually, there's a lot to chew on.
It doesn't immediately frame itself. It's like a pretty humble pilot.
Yeah.
It doesn't overly frame itself as complex or like it's going to cross a lot, but just hearing that it covers a large period of time, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm in it. I'm ready.
And it helps that a lot of these episodes are really, really tightly paced. This novel was released episodically, and there are 40 chapters.
Woof.
So Thackeray was writing by the word count. And the book is about 500 pages long. So
Wow.
you gotta
Oh
keep
my
it pretty
goodness.
dang snappy if you
my
want to do
goodness.
it in 7 episodes. And I feel like it's tight enough that there is definitely so much to unpack in almost every scene. At least
Right.
in the pilot.
Yeah, I have a feeling that'll continue. Like watching the first episode of John Adams, I was like, yeah, I think they could probably stretch this out, and then they super duper did, and that was, I think, was that 6 episodes? So I believe that they can in 7 episodes give me a lot of as we like to say, meat to chew on. So we will in fact be chatsing this one. This will be another banked season, just for the people keeping score at home. It'll be our second banked season after Sunset Chatz is done airing, which is very exciting. That means that we're gonna like personally be not like recording it week to week for people that are listening at home. But yeah, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do 2 episodes a week, and then I think we're gonna do episode 7 by itself probably.
Yeah, I think so.
And then try to do if we have time, we'll try to also do the 2004 movie. Omens, this was wonderful.
This
Thank
was
you
wonderful.
for coming by.
Thank you all so much for having me. It's always an absolute joy to be here.
Is there any place you want people to find you on the internet?
I am at Old as Your Omens on Twitter. That's my personal. It's locked. Just send me a request. And
So the Chatz kids sent you.
yeah. And my Tumblr is chasingthestyline.tumblr.com.
Oh yeah.
And otherwise, the Chatz Discord is a thing now. So I'm on there.
Yeah. Get on it, people.
If you are a patron, is at least $1 or more, we have a post on the Patreon. I don't know how we can like pin posts or something. If you don't find that link and you just want the link, we can also just send it.
Yeah, there's a way to add Discord benefits to Patreon rewards that I have to figure out. But once I figure
beautiful.
that out, it'll be easier to find, I think.
Yeah, but we've been having a lot of fun over there. We didn't do this episode live, but we did a recent episode of the Chatz Files live in the Discord, which was a lot of fun. So you can hear us record episodes live. We're discussing in there. We're posting memes and GIFs and all sorts of good stuff. It's a very fun zone.
Yeah, people are making fun of us for interrupting guests and stuff. And
Yeah.
you know, all sorts
We're
of
just
stuff.
getting roasted basically all the time. We did in fact interrupt our guest a couple times here, so good.
But yeah, there you go. So thank you again, Omens, for joining us, and we look forward to what are we going to call it? Vanity Chats Fair?
Chatz Fair or Vanity Chats?
Chatsity
What do you
Fair?
think, Omens?
Vanity Chats?
Vanity Chats, probably. It sounds better.
Okay, Vanity Chats. All right,
Chatz Fair is too broad.
Yeah.
Chats Fair, yeah. So stick, in a couple months, it's going to come right at you. Vanity Chats, be on the lookout, be ready for it. And until then, thank you, Omens. And after this brief break, we will be back for part 2 of this episode of PilotChatz. Oh man, what fun that was having Omens on for that pilot of Vanity Fair. And wouldn't you know it, we're going to have Omens on for the entire mini-season of Vanity Chats. Now, our next mini-series is also a show about social standing, about deceitfulness, about finding your true self. I'm really trying to figure out the connections here between Vanity Fair and HBO's seminal miniseries adaptation of Angels in America. Let's take a listen to our discussion of it now. Yeah.
I want to like Neil Gaiman. I just I'm iffy on his stuff. You know what I'm not iffy on though, Magellan?
Oh, give me your opinion already, huh?
AIDS.
Oh, I see. You're
It's bad.
very much against it. I see. I thought
Yes.
not if he was gonna swing towards positive, but
Yeah, I got you. That's the old 7-10 flip as we talk about Angels in America. Of the Tony Kushner play of the same name from 1991. The series is set in 1985, and it revolves around 6 New Yorkers whose lives intersect in a story about love, New York City, the Reagan era, AIDS crisis, being gay in the 80s, and everything going on in the world, and love, divorce, the drug epidemic, etc. This is a heavy freaking series. This one seems more up your alley, so I want to hear what you thought of this one, actually.
I want to hear what you thought of this one, because I already told you that I really loved it.
Okay.
I can reiterate those opinions, I guess, but you're keeping your take very close to the vest, so you're making me curious. But essentially, yeah, the whole idea of Angels in America is that you're following a cast of various characters living in New York, who crisscross and intersect in different ways, and it's meant to be this kind of parable about, how, at least the theme that I got from it was how the kind of like pressures of this resurgence of like right-leaning Christian culture in the 80s is pressuring all of these different characters to hide their true selves, and they sort of damage themselves in the process of doing that. That's part of it. And then, as you're saying, the other part of it is just about AIDS and its impact, and the way that different characters' lives are fundamentally changed by its presence, either in themselves or in the people that they know. And yeah, I mean, the older I get, the more interested I get in the latter half of the 20th century in America from a historical perspective. I think for the longest time, I just didn't really have any interest in 20th century history, because, well, partly because we barely learned it in high school. My AP US history teacher taught basically from 1950 to 2000 in the span of an afternoon, and was like, here's everything you have to know about Nixon, blah, 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 blah. He rushed through all of it. So for me, and I didn't really take a 20th century history course in college, maybe like one or something. But I've always been much more interested in the 1800s and in American history. But stories about the radicalism of the 60s and 70s have increasingly fascinated me, because it's like, oh shit, the US actually used to be a lot more openly radical than it is now. It's not, I'm really fascinated by this notion of like, there isn't a sort of linear progress in our history. There actually was a time period where there was open rioting and revolution of all sorts, and then we had this conservative backlash for decades. And I think 1985 is an interesting year to examine from the perspectives in this story, as a moment where conservatives have pretty much just successfully pushed the lid back onto American radicalism, and Reagan has won a second term, and so now there seems to be this endorsement of that particular vision of America's future. And so from a historical perspective, this was really interesting to me. I feel like I just said a lot, but there's that. And then, emotionally, there were some characters that I think were really strange in this, to the point of not being relatable. And then there are some characters who I think have moments of deep human beauty that can only really happen in theater. And it's sort of miraculous that it was translated to the screen. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's what I liked about it.
No, that was a lot. That was a lot, and I appreciate it, because I kind of needed to know what lens to tackle talking about this from. There's a lot going on. I mean, this is split up into 6 episodes, but I believe the first pair, or maybe the first 3 were aired in like an evening, and then the other 3 were aired later, because each one is an act of the play. Each one is an act of a play. The first is it's 2 different plays that combine to form the entirety of Angels in America, as I understand it. So it's 2 3-act plays. So what we watched is the first act of the first play. And I think it's cool that it has a beginning and a middle and an end, but it does, like as I said earlier, really feel like you're watching a play that has background setting. Like there are very few extras that matter too much, and you can tell that like some actors are in makeup and are going to appear later as other characters, stuff like that. And people shout their life stories at each other. I think especially Ben Shankman's character Louis is very much like, he just hits you with his backstory after his grandmother's funeral, and he's like, I feel a stress with my partner. I feel like I have to be closeted in front of my family. It's the 80s and I'm worried about that. Oh my God, he has AIDS. I want to leave him, which is fundamentally such a dark and sad, or he's worried about leaving him. I don't, not to say that he wants to explicitly, but I think there's something so personal and so nakedly honest about a character. It's like, I love the song, the Beach Boys song that starts, I may not always love you.
God only knows.
Right. That line right there where it's like, oh my God, that was such an incredible line at the time, especially because it was like, wait, you don't, like, in music, you don't say you don't love the person. What are you talking about? You're married. Like, what?
Yeah.
And for him to be like, I'm afraid of heartbreak and tragedy, so instead I'm going to cut and run from this guy who matters a lot to me. It hits really hard, and it's been one episode. Like, I just met this guy, and I'm already so invested in his life.
Right, yeah.
I think the show succeeds really, really well there. I, like you were saying, there are some characters where I'm like, what's the angle we're hitting here? But it's really creative, too. Like, it bounces between these characters. I think off the top of my head, I'm only thinking of 5 characters. I don't know who the 6th is yet. But that summary mentions 6
I know like Meryl Streep is in it, and we haven't seen her yet or something. So
we have seen her.
Did we?
Yes. Do you want to know who she is? You want me to blow your freaking mind right open?
I guess so.
Meryl Streep is the rabbi at the beginning of the episode.
No, shut up. Really?
Yes.
Oh,
Meryl Streep is an old Jewish man makeup.
I knew something was going on with that rabbi at the beginning.
I kept saying he had a higher pitched voice, and I was going, no, come on, Alan. He's older. Like, don't be rude. That's stupid of you to say that. Come on, it's Meryl Streep.
Sucks. That sucks.
So she comes back a lot.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, she's gonna be recurring. We need to keep from talking about the chaotic nucleus of the show, which is the star at the front of it. But I want to really quickly zoom in on Patrick Wilson's Joe Pitt and his wife, Mary Louise Parker, shout outs to her, as Harper Pitt, and their whole situation, where she has a very serious addiction to Valium. Yep. Again, it's the 80s, and she's a housewife. This is unfortunately very common. Yeah. And he is a conservative, Reagan-voting, hardworking,
Can I ask you a question quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm getting the sense, I'm wondering if it's relating to these characters that you're about to describe, but I'm getting the sense that you have some reservations about the show, and I'm curious what those are. No,
I really, really like the show. I guess I'm just curious. I think it's kind of in a sensitive area right now, especially where we are at today. Like, my main takeaway from the show was that I wish they made something with this budget and this scope in the modern era. Because I think the 80s in New York City is so fascinating, but I've seen it so many times in fiction that now I'm like, can we see this story, but with a modern, the modern times?
Sure.
And preferably with fewer white people. But that's what the story is. That's my main reservation of it, just to unbury the lead. I really, really love this pilot. And I'm not saying that with a but at the end of it. I really like this pilot. A lot. Like No. I swear, dude.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I did almost cry when Pryor Walter and Louis are talking on the bench, and he tells him he has AIDS, and he just breaks instantly. Yeah. I was like, oh, acting is hard. I just met these men. Like, the choice to start on a funeral is important, right? Because it's like death is going to matter in this series, and it's going to center around death and dealing with things we can't control. That's why you start a play or whatever on a funeral. But going back to the Pitt family,
to Joe and to
Harper. Yeah.
Mhm.
I always forget how amazing of an actress Mary Louise Parker is.
Oh my god, yeah, she knocked me to the floor.
Yeah, every time. I've watched exactly one episode of Weeds, and she's absolutely she was my favorite on Weeds too.
Yeah.
Obviously she's the star, so she gets a lot of time. And Justin Kirk is also on Weeds. I remember liking him in that episode. But she just brings this like heartache and exhaustion and like understanding that the system is never going to like this marriage is never going to work.
Yeah.
To the point where they're like going, it's the most tense we are going to bed scene I've ever seen. And I haven't seen like Marriage Story. I know they go into like similar stuff like this, but the two of them just need to stop talking and go to bed. But they really are like, nope, we're airing every single bit of dirty laundry. Are you a homosexual? Are you addicted to pills? Are you sleeping with? So it's like everything just ripping the floorboards out. And that high drama and that high action really like got my heart racing. And I was just really like bowled over by it. I think the show is a little bit histrionic, but that's to be expected. 100%.
Definitely.
But yeah, I just thought I was so engaged. Once I clicked into it, it took me a little bit. Like I thought that funeral scene was interesting, but like you were saying, you're looking at the rabbi and you're like, this just seems weird. What's the show trying to tell me to feel right now with this introduction? And then once we got into like the two guys, Pryor and Lewis, I was like, all right, we're in it. I'm in it. And from there on, I was completely invested.
Yeah, I just had a thought about that funeral scene as a sort of like cipher to decode the show or the play or whatever. And I'm sure there's been a ton written about it, so I'd have to read up on the criticism. But I mean, the thing that was really confusing for me is that Meryl Streep's sermon as the rabbi seemed, the music was indicating like, oh yes, the sweeping, beautiful emotions of this, but the performance was indicating like, oh, that's the rabbi. He doesn't know my grandma's name. He doesn't know anything about her. He's just kind of like riffing. And the other thing about it was that the rabbi was basically like, well, you know, it doesn't really, I don't know what her life was like specifically, but she represents this story of like, you know,
she's every immigrant
she's
that has
every
ever come
immigrant.
here.
Right, exactly. And it made me think about just now about the characters that we see in the story in front of us, right? And to what extent, and we still haven't talked about the very famous man playing a famous man.
Hold on.
But there is that sort of quality to the characters in this play as well, that they are not necessarily themselves. They are not necessarily like truly fully realized individual people, but rather they are these archetypes of characters who, you know, existed probably in many forms and in the lives of many people in Reagan's America in 1985.
Yeah.
And these characters are representative of them. And to assert, I think what the play is trying to acknowledge, and I don't know if I'd have to rewatch the scene and read it and whatever, but I think what the play is trying to acknowledge up front is that like there is a beauty to that. And there's also kind of just an inherent comedy in how like impersonal and futile it is to try to understand an individual person's life through an archetypical stereotype almost.
Interesting point. Go on. Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, like, you know, the character.
This is the white Jewish gay couple in New York City. There's 8 million of these.
Right.
This is the like drug addicted housewife and the conservative.
This is the
working
closeted
man.
Conservative man. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Like Joe as a character, you get so early on, okay, he's probably going to be like a closeted homosexual man, right? You can read that really early. And I think there's just like, to a certain extent, that it can take you out of it, the way that it takes you out of the rabbi's sermon at the beginning, where he's like, yeah, I don't know what she looked like. I don't. Let me look at the paper. I forget what her name is. And you're like, okay, is this real? But
Yeah.
then when you choose to buy into it, it ends up being pretty affecting. So I don't really know what to make of that, but I think that that's at the core of this show, and the way that we have to interact with it is it's very much that theater thing where, you know, there's some plays where the characters are just meant to be archetypes
Stand-ins for a group.
yeah,
Exactly.
or icons or representations of a larger group or whatever. They're meant to be kind of pieces of the scenery to a certain extent, as well as people and characters. But they're symbols too. And that definitely, when that gets translated to cinema or to TV, can be a little bit jarring. But
Right.
yeah.
I'm really curious because this is a mini series. This that's supposed to be one long thing, one long story, and it's broken up into 6-hour-long chunks. Where they're gonna go and where some of the magic is gonna come from, because right now it's still entirely a real story about real people. The only time we interact with it, we know, well, at least that we know of. I have a theory, but the only time we know we interact with magic is when Harper.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes,
Harper.
she interacts with Jeffrey Wright's character, who is presumably an angel named Mr. Lies, which is incredible. Jeffrey Wright is like looking super handsome, and I'm like, damn, Jeffrey Wright.
Yeah, when she has that hallucination at the beginning.
Yes.
Well, and the part where she meets Pryor in their dreams or whatever, that's also pretty fantastical.
True. I think that those two characters specifically will do more dream sequences, as I understand it.
Okay.
So eventually they start to bond, because the whole thing is this is a pretty ambitious miniseries, to be honest with you. It's doing everything we've talked about, and it's also going for the like interconnectedness of humanity story, right? Everybody knows each other because Louis is in the bathroom and he runs into Joe and they talk and he says, "Hey, I don't know if you knew this, but you're definitely gay," and that like causes the whole problem between Joe and Harper. And then Pryor and Lewis, Lewis works under the character that we're not talking about yet, and so does Joe. So like they all center around that, and it's interconnected in a way that's really interesting. But the two corners of it, which are the Pitt family and Pryor and Lewis, interact via this really stunning dream sequence.
Yeah,
where it's like a Red Room, Twin Peaks style, but a lot less.
I was just gonna say Twin Peaks. Yeah.
It's definitely pulling from that, but not as there's a lot more set dressing going on. It's not as stark as that, I guess.
Yeah, it's like a different tone, but it's the same notion that there is this you as the viewer
collective dream space.
Yeah, and you as the viewer just sort of accepting the reality of that for the sake of the stories that can be told only within the context of like a dream room.
So I loved that scene, and it's like him explaining to her what being gay is like, and he's in drag, and it's like done pretty tastefully. I mean, I don't know actually how Justin Kirk identifies sexually, but
sure,
it feels like this show is really going for it's swinging for the fences, but that metaphor almost feels inappropriate because it's trying to handle it sensitively.
Yeah.
It's like gently tapping at the fences, but it knows that it can break through eventually. In the talking about homosexuality, and that, my friend Magellan, brings us to the character again, the nucleus.
Before we fall into that pit, can I just say something about the drag that I'm kind of curious about? Or
yes, please do.
Like, I wonder, because you were saying before how you want for there to be a show or a project that kind of revisits these themes and ideas, but in a modern context. And I wonder if we've lost, because of just how much drag is in the mainstream now. I mean, obviously there's still, people have hangups about it or whatever. But like RuPaul's Drag Race,
Yeah.
So I wonder if we've just lost some of what that meant when that was on stage in whenever it was originally staged, or when that was on HBO in 2003, because to me it kind of ended up being almost like a very tame portrayal of drag. Not that it needed to be anything more than that, but it felt like the camera was looking at him as if like the fact that he was in drag was meant to be something in and of itself, you know?
Right. That's the factor. That's the magic factor of it. Because
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, it's like starts in black and white, and then he walks past a mirror, and then he comes around, and the camera zooms in on his face, and he is in full drag, makeup and everything. His eyes look incredible. And I agree. If we end up talking more about this show, we have to incorporate different lenses and hopefully have on some other guests who can speak more to that, like the modern perception of drag and how it sometimes conflicts with trans identity in some really awful ways, some harmful ways. I mean, I think, like you said, RuPaul's kind of a shitheel. He seems like a terrible bad person. Is very pro fracking, for example, amongst other several things.
Yeah.
Frack is on his own property. It's a whole thing. But yeah, that is a larger topic that needs to be discussed if you're going to watch something like this. But obviously, we can appreciate the like historical significance of this show as it was coming out. I've known about this show forever. I remember like one of the first videos in my YouTube favorites is a scene from later in the show that I'm not going to spoil on an airplane. And I'm just going to say that. And it's like really, really powerful. It's a speech. I believe it's Harper talking about something while she's on a plane. And it's just really memorable. And like, I was like, oh man, this show seems really good. What is it even about? And I never actually like, gave it a shot. So the show's definitely like important to television, you know? Sorry, you were saying.
No, I think let's talk about
Roy.
Yeah.
So Roy Cohn is in this show, guys. The lawyer to Donald Trump.
Lawyer mentor to Donald Trump. The prosecutor in the Army McCarthy hearings. The prosecutor in the Rosenberg trial.
The Roy Cohn, played by, drumroll everybody, the Al Dunkachino. Al Pacino is actually Roy Cohn in this, guys.
Oh my god.
And it's amazing. It's the best performance in the fucking pilot. It's not fair.
Incredible.
He stomps all over everyone else in this in the last scene especially.
Yeah, the last scene, but also that first scene where he's constantly having to switch the phone calls on the switchboard or whatever.
Oh, it's so good.
And he keeps talking to the wrong person and interrupting Joe and thinking he's talking to his secretary when he's talking to whoever else is on the phone and stuff.
Yeah.
It's really funny. And Al Pacino is one of those actors where sometimes he just sucks. And other times
he takes a lot of like mediocre films in his recent years also.
Yeah. And other times he is like a transcendent performer. It's unreal.
And I think this is a latter for sure.
Yeah, for sure. This is definitely one of the best performances I've seen him do in what I've seen of him.
It's wild. So Roy Cohn, for those who don't know, like we said, very successful lawyer from the like 50s into the 80s. Worked alongside McCarthy in the McCarthyism trials. Has done some horrible stuff. Seems like a terrible person.
Yeah.
TBH.
Yeah.
Also, had a lot of gay sex and doesn't, to his deathbed, Magellan never called himself a gay man. That scene at the end,
and never admitted he had AIDS, which is what he died of complications due to AIDS.
And said, "I'm not gay." And it's so wild that this is real, right? We talked about this over text before the episode, but all these other characters are fictional, sort of like outlines of real people.
Yeah, like allegorical characters almost.
This is a dude you can read about. This is a guy who did actually say being gay is a sin. I'm not gay. I just have a lot of sex with guys.
Yeah.
And that's probably what's going to kill me. And it's not AIDS, guys. Don't call it that.
Yeah.
Of course he's friends with Donald Trump. He's just lying around the truth. Like, what? Bananas real life figure. Highly recommend reading about him if you want a slice of American history and the business world and how corrupt it is. But yeah, Pacino just brings a stunning level of gravitas to the point where I almost feel bad when his doctor played shoutouts, by the way, by James Cromwell, who is so good.
Yeah, he's great.
He doesn't need to play that way. He can just bounce off of Al Pacino, but instead he's like, no, I'm gonna play like an actual whole character here. And he's telling him like, you have multiple illnesses and multiple lesions, as I believe Prior Walter says earlier, I'm a legionnaire. I'm covered in legions because he's trying to make light of it.
Yeah.
Which is bleak, but really well performed. And he's like, yeah, no, I have connections, and people with connections aren't gay. I can call the president. Not only that, I can call the president's wife. Not only that, but I could just tell her, I could tell doctors to come and fix me if they wanted to. I don't want to. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to be fine. He feels invincible because it's the 80s and he's a successful white guy.
Yeah, well, and it's almost what you start to understand over the course of that scene is he says something about like, I'm someone who can get things done, who can like get laws passed, whatever, and like gay men can't do that. And so it's partly just like this, I don't know, this acknowledgement and fear of the fact that like if anybody were to find out that he was homosexual, instantly any sort of cachet he has in society completely evaporates.
Right.
And I think Al Pacino does a great job of playing the bravado of that scene, but if you stare into his eyes, you can see just how scared shitless he is of dying and of being found out at the same time. And he's like trying to figure out which one is scarier to him. But yeah, it's an incredible scene at the end there. And it made me curious about like, because this play was first performed in 1991. The miniseries comes out in 2003. Roy Cohn, spoilers, died in 1986. So it just made me wonder about like what audiences going to Angels in America at the time, you know, when it was in theaters, in real sit down, watch the actors
on Broadway.
Theaters. Yeah. What it must have been like to them, because to us it's this like hilarious thing. Oh my God, this is a real dude. And I wonder if that was even more jarring at the time or less jarring or what. Because
it's definitely different, right?
Right. And I don't know how to retrieve what that was like in the context of the time.
Right. That's one of the ultimate frustrations with the show is we can't actually go back in time to the stuff that we watch. We have to ask people who maybe saw it or were aware of it at the time.
And I think that's the thing of... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, just literally if you Google Roy Cohn right now, half of the pictures are him and Trump because he is inexorably tied to a modern political ideologue, right? So
true. Definitely true.
That's just it. His history has changed so much that this feels like 3 lifetimes ago, the version of him that we're seeing in Angels in America.
Yeah, because that version of him in Angels in America, people probably would have tied more to like Nixon or Reagan or something.
Or McCarthy.
Like or McCarthy, yeah. By the way, like his line where he's like complaining about some government person and he's like, all the geeks were appointed by Nixon or something. He gives like a little wink to Joe or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what was I going to say? Shoot.
You were going to say that we need to watch the live version of this with Andrew Garfield and Nathan Lane.
Wait, what? Nathan Lane as Roy Cohn?
I don't know who is who. Actually, it's possible. I'd have to look up the actual the playbill of it, but I know Nathan Lane's in it. I think he's Roy Cohn. If that's true, that's God tier. That might be.
Andrew Garfield is probably Prior Walter.
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing.
Yeah,
I'll look into this.
The thing I remembered I was gonna say. Yeah, I think what's fascinating about Angels in America is live theater. I don't know if this is true or not, but to me, it often feels like the great works of live theater are so much more tied to their time than like the great works of cinema, for example.
Good point. Interesting point.
And maybe that's not true. Maybe part of it is that cinema has just been around for less time also.
I mean, because, think about it. Hamilton is the 2010s, right?
Yeah.
It's like inexorably the 2010s, and a lot of Andrew Lloyd Webber's stuff is like Cats is the 80s.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense outside of the 80s as much.
And I guess you could say that about certain films too. I guess there are plenty of films that like belong in their time, but it's so interesting to me watching this and thinking about like, okay, I'm in 2021 watching something that was put out on TV in 2003, but by the time and set in 1985, but really it's created
based on a
in
play
the-
from 1991.
Yeah, it's really sort of commenting on and in this mode of the 90s, sort of digesting the AIDS crisis as it has been going on for a while. And like all of those different contexts having bearing upon my experience of watching it, it's kind of hard to parse. And it feels like this is something that belongs to someone else or belongs somewhere else. But that makes it fascinating. What's
Buddy,
going on? What's going
sorry, I just finally was able to go on Broadway.com and look up the cast of the current or the most recent Angels in America.
Uh-huh.
Get this, man. Nathan Lane as Roy Cohn.
Yep.
Andrew Garfield as Prior Walter. And drumroll, Lee Pace as Joe Pitt.
Ooh,
Are you
perfect.
kidding me, dude?
Oh,
They actually got a gay man to play Joe. That's so good.
so
or I think he's
good.
bi. But still, oh my god, I'm over the moon. We gotta watch it. I think it's streamable. I'll
really?
do that, guys. Yeah, I'm not gonna watch the show. I'm gonna watch this play. No, I'm gonna watch both.
Ooh,
Yeah, that's juicy. That's
sounds
extremely juicy.
really good. Yeah.
There's an article here. Angels in America starring Garfield and Nathan Lane is available to stream as of February 8th, 2021. Mwah, mwah. I love it. I'm very happy
Oh
about
wow,
this.
that's very recent.
And you can see Nathan Lane in here, and he looks incredible. Oh my god.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. So I think we could talk about Chat's ability if you would like to do that. Does that work for you?
I do.
What do you think?
Oh, sorry. Last thing I was gonna say about this like series.
Oh my god, I'm looking at Nathan Lane as Roy Cohn.
Is this so good? It's like
wow,
bananas.
you can feel his character just from the way he's holding his mouth. That's amazing.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh, they tend to cast not. This is the weird thing about casting this version and all versions of the play is these are gay actors that are gay characters that are often not played by gay actors.
Sure.
Which Broadway has bigger problems. Also, this is worth noting, super duper mega ultra white. A lot of the big queer movements of the 1980s and part of the AIDS crisis were queer young black folks. So that is something that I wish this series could at least acknowledge, and maybe it does. But I don't necessarily hold it. I don't expect it to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, so sometimes it's a bummer where I'm like, I don't know. And I don't need to dig into wait, but is Andrew Garfield gay? Is that allowed? I'm not trying to cancel Angels in America. But anyways, you were saying Chat's ability.
Yeah, what do you think?
So for this one, I think this is well, okay. You and I really want to watch this. And people like it when we enjoy the thing we're watching. Sometimes. Sometimes they like it when we hate it. I don't think a lot of people are talking about this. Do you know of any Angels in America podcasts?
No.
No.
I've definitely heard of Angels in America. I don't know that I've ever seen a piece on it or any conversation about it. But I just know that it is one of the miniseries that people are like, these are the greatest miniseries ever.
Right. And maybe we can look into why that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I look it up on my podcast app, I mostly get stuff about the play, talking about the play. There's a podcast called The Broadway Theater Panel where they spoke to, I think they actually spoke to the guy. I'm not trying to look into this right now. Maybe. Also, we're noting the guy who directed this did a bunch of other stuff. It's very well directed. He did The Graduate, guys.
It's beautifully directed. That whole, the whole dream sequence.
Mike Nichols.
The whole dream sequence in the room place is gorgeous.
The Graduate, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, a bunch of other stuff I don't know, and then Charlie Wilson's War, the last movie he made, I've heard is extremely good. Or directed rather, not made. You know what I mean? Yeah, this is chanceable to us. What I was getting at is is this marketable? I don't know if that's kind of uncool to say, but are people excited? Are galvanized to talk about Angels in America in 2021?
I think that is the least of the barriers. You know what I mean? Because
what are some barriers that you're concerned about?
Well,
let's do a SWOT analysis.
Just to address that, because there's only 6 episodes, so you're only talking about 3 episodes of our podcast.
no recap, no. Like maybe we'll watch the other version of it, but I don't think that'll get us like much different takes.
Yeah,
I'm
just not particularly concerned about what people think. I don't know how to say that, but like I don't give a shit, ultimately.
Yeah. That's why I'm the business student and you're the podcast. I'm just kidding.
I think I would really love to cover it.
Me too.
I think the considerations are what you were saying about just how white the show is, and how like ostensibly
a lot of these are straight actors playing gay characters.
That stuff, and then these characters seem to be like financially pretty fine too, So
the middle class, the non-existent middle class.
Right. So all of those things are concerns that I think are surmountable. We just have to sort of be conscious of them in how we talk about the show. To me, I think it presents similar problems to Roots, where at least me, speaking just for myself here, like I was a white guy talking about Roots. I would be a straight guy talking about Angels in America.
Right.
And that limits what I know and what I'm able to speak to in those conversations. And it also might limit, maybe I see a story that's like, wow, that was so moving, or, oh my God. And someone who, is closer to the identity or closer to the experience that is theoretically being portrayed is like, no, man, that actually was not good. So I don't know that I totally trust my criticism. I think I was more confident in it when we watched Roots because I have spent a lot more time like studying the history there. Whereas this, I know very little about the 80s and about the AIDS crisis and about theater and all those sorts of things. So that to me, speaking for myself, is sort of, I think, the biggest barrier. But again, if we're talking about like 3 episodes, it's one of the most famous, biggest miniseries ever. I think it's like worth the trade-offs as long as we're being thoughtful about it.
I think you're right, and maybe we look into not necessarily a third, but just somebody like to consult and talk to about this stuff.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, we think this part is bad. Is it actually bad? Do you think it's bad? Do you think it's good? Like, what do other people know about? Because I mean,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I literally know queer people who lived in New York in the 80s. So it's like,
right.
We have that,
right.
That option.
And there's also, I'm sure, just as when we were watching Roots, we researched like, what do people think of Roots? We can do the same thing.
Yeah.
What do people think of this? Because it's one of the biggest miniseries of all time. The play has had a very long shadow, in theater. So there's bound to be quite a bit of criticism about it that we can draw from and bring into the conversation.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
So what you're trying to tell me is that you're turning your key on this one.
My key is turned. Yeah.
Wow.
My key is turned.
I'm going to go ahead and turn my key on this.
Dang.
It's miniseries season. Why not watch the best miniseries?
Welcome to season 11, Angels in America.
You welcome, as I used to say on the Joe Decorum, welcome to the kingdom of heaven. Take a seat. That's much funnier when I'm talking about Squirtle than when I am about a miniseries about angels. Oh, I whiffed that joke real bad.
Squirtle.
Yeah. Squirtle.
Squirtle.
It's so easy to make you giggle sometimes, and I love that about
Squirtle.
you. Yeah, I think this is a key turn, folks. I think we want to watch this one. If people are hyped about this, let us know. I would love some positive feedback. If you're not hyped about this, let us know. If you're like, no, you guys are not the people to talk about Angels in America, give that to someone else. But honestly,
I mean, I'm open to hearing that feedback as well.
yeah,
of
absolutely,
course.
no, 100%. I mean, but honestly, I just don't think people are doing it. I don't think there's like, I don't think that's happening right now.
Yeah,
Maybe in writing, but not in the podcast arena.
yeah.
Quake 3 arena. So, yeah, seems pretty dope.
Yeah.
Tony Kushner, get on Chatz. We'll get Tony Kushner on the pod,
Maybe, yeah, why not? We'll shoot our shot, see what happens.
and we'll just talk about Lincoln.
Yeah. What was it like working with Spielberg?
Yeah,
What's
he
like?
wrote the screenplay, and Tony Kushner wrote the screenplay for Lincoln. Guys.
Yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm. I'm telling the kids, not you.
Thank you, Alan.
You're welcome.
Man, Lincoln, by the way, talk about centering white people in a narrative that's not about them.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's a story for another day. You wouldn't expect two miniseries about deadly, debilitating pandemics to be quite so tonally different. And yet, now we're going to transition from Angels in America to 1994's adaptation of the Stephen King book, The Stand, the story of a post-apocalyptic society in which the forces of good and evil battle in the wake of a worldwide pandemic. Listen on, won't you? Hello and welcome to PilotChatz. What's up, Alan?
Hi, hello, welcome, Magellan, to the real show, the realest show, the nasty show where nothing gets edited out, nothing gets cut. I can say whatever I want on here because it's the Patreon, baby. Here it comes. I'm gonna say a big cuss word, and Magellan can't cut it out by law. Fart.
Damn.
Oh my god. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
You could just have any cuss word you wanted, and you chose fart.
Oh, I don't get another one? Oh, shoot. There's one. Listen, Magellan, baby, booby, boobala.
Mm-hmm.
We've been in quarantine for a year. There's a recent episode of Sunset Chats where we talk about, hopefully this releases after the pandemic is over. Oopsie! Sorry about that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in the season of we're working our way through the season of miniseries, of Chatz miniseries, and Magellan and I both wanted to just make ourselves suffer a little bit. No, I'm just kidding. That's not exactly right. But we still have pandemics and viruses on our mind, even as the vaccines get rolled out, and neither of us have much exposure to the king of horror himself, Stephen King. So we figured, what better place to start than with his longest work? And we don't know how to read books. I literally don't know how to read. And so his longest book is the uncut version of The Stand. Mm-hmm. And this has been recommended to us a couple times, and it was in a lot of lists of like best miniseries. So we figured we would check out not the most recently released CBS All Access / Paramount Plus miniseries of it. No. Although
It's too new.
I did some research on that one to compare. But no, we actually checked out for this episode of PilotChatz the first 90-minute section of the 1994 miniseries adaptation of The Stand. So, Magellan, lay the record straight. Set the record straight. What's your history with Stephen King?
I have minimal history with Stephen King, I would say. I mean, I'm trying to think if I've read anything by Stephen. I'm aware of many stories by him and have seen film adaptations of them,
Yeah.
like Shawshank Redemption. I was in in college, like a film adaptation class where we read the short story that Shawshank is based on and watched Shawshank, but I don't remember if I read the story actually and did my homework or not. And then, I'm aware of like Carrie and Cujo, and I think I had a friend in middle school who like read Carrie and was like, "Whoa, man, Carrie, it's crazy." Oh my God. And I haven't seen The Shining, but I know what happens and stuff like that. But I don't know that. And then it wasn't Stand By Me. No.
Yeah. Yes.
That's Stephen King also.
Yeah.
He wrote The Stand and Stand By Me. Weird. But I would say minimal exposure overall. What about you?
Stephen King has some relevance to both of us on Chatz because he wrote an episode, he's in an episode of Frasier season 8, which is weird. And he wrote an episode of The X-Files season 5. So you'll get to that someday. But no, otherwise for myself, I've seen and really enjoy The Shining as a film. I think it's a very good film. And God, I really do think that's it. I remember seeing copies of it in our middle school library or something. I don't know why it was there. It's definitely too mature for that library, but I've known of it. But no, I genuinely can. I know he's been on The Simpsons a couple times. I've seen some of those appearances.
Yeah.
But honest to goodness, until this past year, I hadn't really exposed myself to much of Stephen King. Part of the inspiration though for this episode was the wonderful podcast that I was introduced to recently. I'm not a regular listener of, but I've been checking out a couple episodes here and there of Just King Things, which is a podcast about.
Good name.
It's so good, right? The Ranged Touch folks, they're on Twitch a bunch, and they formerly wrote about games. Now they're both academics and writers, PhD people. Cameron Kunzelman and Michael Lutz, they read all of this. They're reading all of the Stephen King books in release order. And so on their Patreon, they're doing the adaptations. And somebody, when I mentioned that we were doing this, said, they did an episode on The Stand recently. It's really good. So I listened to their 3-hour discussion of this miniseries, just to get sort of an overview of what is this series about, because I like to inform myself about the things that we talk about. But it actually, instead of sometimes spoiling things might, and it wasn't actually that spoiler heavy, but sometimes reading ahead on things like that can turn you off of a series. This definitely got me more interested, especially with how eerily relevant it is to our current time.
So for people who aren't familiar with the story of The Stand, I mean, we watched the first part of 4 parts of the 1994 miniseries adaptation, which is called The Plague. And so you can imagine it's this first part is about a deadly flu-like virus that spreads worldwide, and the ramifications of that pandemic. So the relevance is a little spooky. And also, I'm not going to say that I watched this on YouTube, but I did.
Oh, it's all on YouTube.
All of the YouTube comments are from the beginning, March 2020, and it's people being like, "All right, boys, I hope we live through this," or it's kind of spooky in there.
I think there's a lot of moments in this first episode where I'm like, oh God, this is uncomfortable. Talking about, government officials saying the virus is fake, people saying it's just the flu, the classic person is coughing, lots of talk about masks, which sucks. It's fully this, and it is definitely hitting a nerve that I haven't felt hit. Even when we watched Chernobyl, that felt a lot more isolated and didn't seem like it was something that would spread as quickly, although I know if I watch more of it, I'll learn that it totally does. But not globally the way that I forget already what they call the virus. Oh, Captain Trips. That's what they call the virus in
stupid
Stand. It's a very Stephen King-y kind of name. You name it after a fake person.
Yeah.
But what really got me was in these 90 minutes, the virus hits at least the country of the United States really, really fast. It it's a miniseries, so it's trying to adapt a ton of text very quickly. But we go from the first scene in the lab, this very famous scene. Say what you will about it, but their choice to use Blue Oyster Cult, Don't Fear the Reaper, as we pan around a lab full of dead scientists.
I will say that it was dumb. That's what I will say about it.
It's extremely it's so on the nose, right? We've talked about this before, the like choice to use music that contrasts with what you're looking at with the visual.
Yeah, but this music doesn't even contrast.
No, it is just Don't Fear the Reaper.
It's like a song about people will die, yeah, and you're looking at piles of dead people. It's silly.
Not subtle.
I mean, I think also that song has taken on a lot of comedic qualities because of the SNL sketch, but
absolutely,
yeah, it just felt corny as hell.
Yeah, I mean, this thing literally opens on a T.S. Eliot quote, the whole "this is how the world ends" thing, and it's
this is not subtle. That's true,
and that seems accurate. I mean, King actually worked on the teleplay for this adaptation. I think he did not. I don't think he worked on the one for the reboot, but yeah, this is his bread and butter. You've got all of the elements of a Stephen King story. We're talking rural Northeast America. We're talking class awareness. We're talking a regular old blue collar white man with a generic name as our protagonist. And then we're talking the weird underlying magic of good and evil that are controlling everybody. These are just King things, if you will. And it's silly, but yeah, it's kind of difficult to talk about because we're oscillating back and forth between, Rob Lowe's character, who I really like, who's this deaf and mute character who is like dealing with like a responsibility and trying to communicate with people while this is all happening. And then like just the silliness and like even the effects get kind of silly. Like when we pan through the lab and the way that they show that someone's been infected is like there's blood leaking out of his mouth or he's kind of like got boils and it's like, it's weird. Tonally, this is all over the place.
I think the thing that's tough for this miniseries is that it's 1994, and so this it's a story that like really should look like a movie, and it looks like a TV special. I don't know what it is about the way that it's shot or what, but it just doesn't really look like a film in the moments that it needs to. And I think that's to the detriment of my ability to like take it seriously, Right.
It feels a little bit low rent here and there.
Yeah.
But then it's weird because then you get Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in mother effing Times Square,
God,
which
so strange.
One of my favorite pieces of trivia from the Just King Things episode that they learned was, so you can't film in Times Square. You cannot film movies legally there without permits and a ton of money. The way that they managed it is that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is so tall that they filmed up. So they filmed up to the skyline and they're like, that's not Times Square, but he's in Times Square. Like, it's so funny when you know that and you just see all these shots of like craning over under him and he's towering above the frame. You're like, yeah, they literally were trying to get around shooting permits.
When that happened and it was the close-up of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I was like, that can't be. That can't be. It was like seeing O.J. Simpson in Roots in the first episode of Roots, where it's like, is that no
Juice?
Really? That doesn't make sense.
Apparently, it was either him and or Miguel Ferrer. I think maybe both, who were like really, really wanted to be in this adaptation. Like they requested to be in it as big fans of the novel. But yeah, it's kind of a very star-studded, or a fairly star-studded cast.
Yeah, because you've got, I don't know how big Gary Sinise is at this point, but he must be near his prime, right?
I think so.
Molly Ringwald is in it. Ed Harris is in it.
The 90s were huge for Gary Sinise, for what it's, but like this exact period, he's in his,
Rob Lowe is getting the "and" credit at the end of the opening credits there, so that must mean something about where his career's at. So there are a lot of big names in this adaptation.
Well, I don't know if it's the gas station attendant or if it's a character we're going to meet later, but the guy who voices Patrick Star is in this series too. Patrick from SpongeBob is in this. bizarre.
It's full of things that are fun to us too. Like Ken Jenkins is Molly Ringwald's dad.
Oh, and he's so good.
Which
Unfair.
was a delight. Yeah, it was a total delight.
Do you want to watch because he's not even a denier. That's the crazy thing. There's a lot of characters in this who are like, no, it's not real. I'm not sick. Like the sheriff that Rob Lowe meets. He's like, no, it's fake, whatever. And then he just leaves for 10 minutes, and the other doctor comes back, and he's like, yeah, that guy died, and his whole family died. Sorry. But like with Ken Jenkins, his character, Molly Ringwald's character's father, he's like, yeah, I'm sick. Oh, this might be real. Pay attention to the news. Oh, rest in peace. I'm super dead. Like, he feels very human in a so far a series that feels like it's got some like mixed acting quality across the board.
Yeah, I don't know. Some of the lines have this tell don't show quality to them.
Yeah.
Where he's talking to Molly Ringwald about I think it's Harold, the kid who's like the poet, and brings her the book that he wrote, and he's like, "Oh, I have a big crush on you." Here's
Oh
the book.
God, Harold, yeah.
Yeah, which
They're
is
this fake
my
pimples.
self-insert character, but anyway.
But
And then she's like, Molly Ringwald has this line where she's like, "Oh, I'm the object of a young poet's affection. What else could a girl want?" or something, which is the most written line ever. And then, so she just kind of sounds wooden because of how her character's written. And then Ken Jenkins is able to turn lines like that into just this sort of warm blanket of fatherly affection.
yeah.
Which is, I think he is one of the best actors in this in this episode. I think Ed Harris has some moments where he rivals him, but then Ed Harris also has some pretty wooden lines too.
I was curious why they didn't credit Ed Harris in this. He's an uncredited role, even though he's like a fairly major character, at least in this one.
Oh, weird.
Very weird. He is the military general who is like helping the cover up happen. And he reveals at the end that he's a big poetry fan. In the remake, they make him a fan of classical music. I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like poetry leads to that scene at the end where he just like reads a whole poem, and you're like, or he recites a poem, and that's a lot more fun. But
yeah, that's more interesting to me than him being like, listen to this Beethoven,
yeah,
or whatever. I'm curious. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, which we've already kind of addressed, which is there's a lot of COVID feeling stuff in here.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big, content warning to anyone who is interested in watching this at this point and for the rest of your life, that it's going to make you think of COVID. Were there kind of like standout moments or ideas where you felt it like being extra spooky in the way that it aligned, and conversely moments where you felt it like diverge into, okay, now that I'm living through a pandemic, I know how silly this comes across?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the more subtle things that they do is there's the character, the guy who's like, he's a musician. Is it Larry, I think? There's so many. The thing with Stephen King character names.
The main guy who goes to see his mom in Queens.
Yeah.
That guy.
Yeah.
I think he's Larry. Yeah.
Yes, correct. Confirmed. He, by the way, the whole thing is that he talks about how he's gonna go, I'm gonna get famous, Ma, and she's like, yeah, you sound black on the radio. And he's like, yeah, that's like my talent or whatever. He says this line that's like so weird. He says something like, that brown sound sure do get around. Which you're like, I feel like they know what they're doing, but also yikes. They actually just cast him as a black actor in the remake, which very interesting. So Larry's talking to this woman on the phone who's in LA, and he's like, I'm gonna visit you, baby, and like I'm so excited to see you. And she goes, I don't know, I kind of feel uncomfortable about you coming. Like he goes, I want to. He like talks about how he's gonna like flirt with her. We're gonna make out. I'm gonna take you out, and I'm gonna take you. Like he's just gross. Larry's like, before he realizes the severity of the virus is so gross. But this moment where he cancels travel plans because the person he's going to visit feels uncomfortable, and he's like, all right, I guess I'll just stay in New York for a couple more days, and then I'm going to see you. That one was the first moment of like, oh, they couldn't have planned for that to feel as much as for me to feel as much as I did for that scene. But I think the most powerful scene that felt relevant today was, and it's a little bit over the top, but it's hard to say things that are over the top these days, is the radio, the Ray Flowers scene.
Yeah.
Which is probably the heaviest, maybe the heaviest scene in the episode. I mean, there's a lot of like dead bodies and, magic and people dying and all this stuff and people ignoring viruses and stuff like that, ignoring science. But Ray Flowers, who's played by Kathy Bates, by the way, the legend herself, who has worked with Stephen King multiple times. And she's on the radio. Ken Jenkins is listening to her, and she's getting different calls from people. First of all, the first woman is like, it's super sad. She's talking about, you don't know what it's like to bury your child, and I hate the smaller bodies, all this stuff. Very heavy. But then just the little Stephen King comedic twist where the second guy's like, Ray, first of all, I just want to say I love your show. Anyways, this is a government cover-up. Like, the absurdity there. And then like the National Guard coming in and like gunning her down,
shutting her down on air. Yeah, that was silly. Yeah,
it climbs into the absurd there. That's not something you're gonna hear now.
Throughout this episode, I was thinking a lot about the sort of cover-up aspects of this and just how militant and organized the cover-up is. And it made me think about a couple things. It made me think about how there's that quote, I can't remember whose quote it is, but about how in stories like evil is very interesting and in real life it's just kind of boring.
Yeah.
And it also made me think about just conspiracy theories and how my immediate reaction to most conspiracy theories is the simple explanation is probably that there's no conspiracy behind this and people are just dumb and make mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all this stuff about just how quickly the military and the government mobilizes to cover it up. We saw the real moments for me are when Ed Harris is like, it's just the flu. Come on. It's not anything else. Yeah. But in real life, you have the government saying that sort of thing, but then also truly fumbling any attempt to cover it up also, which is maybe less like movie in the way that this is, but I think ultimately is like a little more interesting actually than the way that it's portrayed here.
Yeah, you don't get a scene in real life, or you don't get a thing in real life, an event, where a reporter goes up to a bunch of military and like asks them questions, and then they're like, take her camera and take the guy out, because military are literally trained to not interact with the press like that. You just can't do that. And if you do, then you would get rid of the evidence, and we would not have seen that. So like, it feels like it's dipping into like this escalates a little bit too fast for the way that the actual our pandemic did. And also the cover up is just handled very, very poorly. I agree. It makes and I think this comes from King's politics too. Like he will often portray the government as overbearing and incompetent as hell. I mean, the guy comes from like the hippie protest era, so you sort of know where his like his politics are coming from there regarding authority. But yeah, they are portrayed extremely poorly in this, and they botch every aspect of covering this up. I mean, what is the inciting event, right? It's there's a scientist who hears that it's happening and tries to escape the gate and manages to get out at the last second, which I have a theory about that, but I don't need to talk about it just yet because it doesn't happen in this episode. So the guy gets out, takes his wife and kids instead of like sealing the rest of the people, or sealing himself in with the rest of the people. And then he drives all the way from Texas he goes from California. The lab is in California, and then he goes to Texas. Yeah. And then he stops at the gas station and gives it to Gary Sinise's character, who is immune, and like all these other guys, and that's how the pandemic spreads. Like, it's, seeing patient zero is not the part of these stories that I care about, honestly. I didn't find myself super engaged by that stuff. Just because we never see those things in real life. We don't know. We know we understand at least now to have started somewhere in Wuhan, but that's all we know about it. Like it's never been isolated to a single person. So a lot of that stuff just felt weird to me. But yeah, very uncomfortable. Rioting happening quickly. Lots of New York City people flipping police cars and whatnot. It kind of like there's like literally a moment where it goes from this seems like it's a bad problem to like 70% of people are dead. Like, it just feels like it kind of happened in the course of a couple shots, which I think is where it got less realistic for me too.
Yeah.
But the thing with The Stand is that it's not just about how a government can botch the handling of a pandemic, or how these misunderstandings can lead to systemic and existential problems with the country. It's about good and evil, and like good men and women going to meet each other in a nice place that where they were brought to by a woman in a dream, and all of that stuff is very dumb is the word I'm going to use. Dumb.
Yeah, and she's a magical older black woman, of course, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's no thanks.
So they're all about to Gary Sneese's character and the musician character and a bunch of good people, and Molly Ringwald's character are all being brought to Texas by this woman that they see in their dreams, where they walk to her in a cornfield. And then there's like a bunch of bad characters, and there's a scary bad man called the Dark Man, and he like electrocutes Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and like eats a deer.
Rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub.
And here's the thing that's weird about it is like Twin Peaks is also like mystical, magical, dumb, but it's not the centered thing about the show. It's like it exists under everything, but there is an element of real life under all of Twin Peaks that makes it so engaging.
I think the other thing about Twin Peaks is like the weirdness is kind of inseparable from the realness, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like Laura Palmer's murder has a surreal quality to it.
But it is a real crime.
Yeah, but the surreal and the real are you can't separate them.
Yeah.
Whereas the Dark Man stuff doesn't feel at all related to like the pandemic aspect of it.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just sort of like, here's what was strange to me about this whole episode being about this plague is it feels like a means, the plague feels like a means to an end to get to the post-apocalyptic story.
Yeah.
So then it's like, why are we seeing this? You know?
Yeah.
Why are we seeing the plague play out and feeling attached to these characters' parents who then die? That in the movie version would be
5 minutes,
an opening crawl at least, and a 5 minutes long at most.
Yes, and that's one of the other weird things that the remake does is it jumps around in time because it knows that spending the first episode, it's actually longer. It's 9 episodes. They're all an hour, so instead of 6 hours, it's 9 hours. It doesn't start on this stuff. It jumps around and goes like, all right, now we've all met in Texas. Like, it doesn't do the whole journey thing. This, because it takes place in chronological order and chooses to spend its whole first 90 minutes on the pandemic, makes you think that that's important. But then we already know just from like basic research about this series that like that's the like you said, the pandemic's not what this is about. It's about Mother Abigail and the Dark Man are in an eternal battle. And they're just, man, we're all just pawns in their fight. And it's like, why?
Yeah.
Stephen King has actually done this kind of thing better in other stories too, which is why it's a bummer.
And I wonder if I think it's impossible to view this without the context of us living through COVID and seeing it. Mm-hmm. But I do wonder, like, if I hadn't lived through COVID, would I have felt that this was as weird as I feel about it now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I don't know. It's just like, don't show me something that's so real in parts and so heavy and is this triggering for me.
And then Randall comes out, or Dark Man comes out of the cornfield and goes,
like, I don't know.
I hate jump scares, by the way. I truly
like
hate
the bit where Larry's on the phone with his LA girlfriend and she's like, I don't know if you should travel. I was like, oh God, this is too much.
Me calling Greyhound to cancel my trip to visit Magellan in New York. Yeah, it's and I hate to say it, it's only that going forward. It's more and more and more of that. I mean, like, this is set to the backdrop of Americana. There's a shot at the end where Stu is like passed out and he looks up and sees the American flag waving. And I was like, yes, The Stand, you did it. This is what it's about. It is about the changing nature of America and how like these things that we, when Ray Flowers is talking about, like, somebody calls her and it's like, oh, the military did this and that. She's like, that wouldn't be very American of them. That is what The Stand should be about. I only want that story. I don't need this, like, magical background for what I already know to be, primally terrifying. It doesn't make it more scary that this is being potentially instigated by, like, an evil man. Like, no, I'm good, guys. I know that the government is evil. I don't need there to be, like, a guy in a leather jacket with long, greasy hair to be evil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah, that is a good point, because all of the people who are involved in the government conspiracy to make whatever pathogen this is are dead by the end of this episode.
Yeah, and those were the villains.
Right, those were the antagonists of this first part, and they all get their comeuppance, and then it's like, all right, and now the stand can begin.
Yeah, you have to make your. There's a shot in the trailer for the remake where Whoopi Goldberg, who plays Mother Abigail in that, of course she does.
Of course.
Literally, who else? I think she was probably the first person they cast. Is like, now you good people against the bad people must make your stand. It's like CBS presents The Stand.
Mm-hmm.
It's so goofy, and it's only going to get more goofy. I want to talk a little bit more about this episode though before we talk about Chat's ability.
Yeah, let's do that.
The LA and New York stuff was fun. I loved the implication that Queens, New York is like the homey suburbs where this guy hangs out.
Yeah. It really felt like, he's going back to the burbs in like the Midwest, and he's coming home from New York, except he's in Queens.
Yeah.
Which I guess there are parts of Queens that are suburban like that.
Certainly.
It's funny.
Stephen King has this weird thing with making disabled characters like either this is like a common thing, not just for him, but for a lot of like horror writers, making disabled characters magical or like have some unique, good quality. And I think it's definitely, it wouldn't fly as much today if Rob Lowe played this character. And the guy playing that character in the miniseries is also, can hear and whatnot, is not deaf and mute. So like that got a lot of flack, but they still did it. And I still loved it. I loved just his interaction with the small town. I think that's like the thing that Stephen King does so well, is the way that people actually act in small towns, because he lived in them for years. His obsession with Maine and with places like Texas and the Midwest, like he genuinely does understand how this generation of people acted and would treat a stranger that comes to their town. If someone was a deaf, how they would be hurt and treated terribly, but some people would try to be fair to them. And I thought all that stuff was like realistic, and not in the COVID way, but just realistic, like how you would treat that character. Like it's a good performance. It just sucks that like they chose to cast a guy who is not deaf or mute, but that kind of casting thing is difficult. So I liked all of his scenes. I thought Franny, played by Molly Ringwald, again was really good. I have a feeling they're not going to handle her well, because I know that Stephen King doesn't do women super well. Just I have that sense in my bones.
And also just like describe to me who she is. After watching this,
she's
episode.
Very like, the dad's like, you don't feel bad about all this cold. She's like, no, I mean, I personally feel great. I feel so good. I feel awesome. Like she's just bubbly and precocious, and it's like you don't seem like an adult. She acts like a child almost. And a lot of the other women characters that are going to get introduced are handled way worse. Like it doesn't. You can't come to a King story for like well-written females on character, unfortunately.
Yeah, for as much as I don't like Gary Sinise's character, I understand who he's supposed to be. Molly Ringwald's character, I don't really get it.
100%. 100%. And then just there's like some weird stuff, like when Gary Sinise by the time Gary Sinise was walking out of the hospital, I was like, I'm watching The Walking Dead. Not just because the first episode of AMC's The Walking Dead ends with Rick walking out of the hospital, but we went from Contagion for the first like 3/4 of this to just like The Walking Dead, like any other zombie, or it's like we have to rebuild. Like that's what The Stand ends up being about. It's like we're all gonna go to Texas and rebuild society, and it's like I've watched this. I've seen this story before. Even if it's not about the good and evil stuff, like I've seen this. That's probably what a lot of people thought. Looking back on The Stand, was like it set the precedent for this type of like epic traveling across America contagion story, but now it's been done to death.
Yeah, it's a case of the things that are derivative of it are just way more interesting than it is.
I think so. Did you have any other notes on the episode though?
Not anything that was like really worth talking about. I enjoyed the fact that the rip of it that I was watching on YouTube looked like it was straight. It was straight from a VHS.
Yeah.
Was there a bit? Was there a bit in the middle where the screen turned blue for you, or was that literally the fact that it was from a VHS?
I believe that was yours. That was not on mine.
That is. I love that. Don't you miss like knowing exactly where your copy of something you taped off of TV would get like fuzzy or messed up or something like that?
Yeah, and it's like, welcome Pocahontas to the new world. Like that distortion. I love VHS distortion. It's the best aesthetic ever.
So cool. Yeah.
I kind of wish I watched really like a clean DVD cut of this, and I was like, oh, this just looks good. All right.
Yeah, it's a little boring. So yeah, and I really enjoyed something I thought was cool about it actually, is the way, even though the radio scene where the whoever that is, the National Guard, whoever comes in to shut down the radio broadcast, was a weird scene. I do think it's cool the ways in which you can see the role of mass media in this particular kind of event in the 90s. I think that this miniseries does a good job depicting how the news is responding to things and how information is traveling and what's the role of talk radio and television and the little advertisement they throw in for the flu buddy to get people to go to the drugstore to get the flu buddy. And it's like a, 90s 3D weird mascot thing.
And then Larry gives the flu buddy to his mom as she's dying, and it's like, Mom, this will make you better. And then she just like spits it up and dies.
Yeah.
I like that they brought that around.
Yeah, I just thought that it did a good job of kind of like going into the TV screen and using the forms of media and mixing them together to sort of tell the story of like how information spreads and how public perception of this illness develops and changes in a way that is very particular to 1994. Because obviously, if The Stand, do you know if the new recent version of The Stand like is set in the present day?
It is.
Okay, so I'd be curious to see how they like depicted social media or texts or whatever doing the same thing. But
that's a good point.
As a time capsule of 1994, I'm interested in this show for that reason, I would say.
I agree 100%. It's extremely 90s also. Like I got when I saw the old Getty logo when they were in New York, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Hold on. Fun fact, actors considered for the part of the Dark Man at the time were Christopher Walken, Willem Dafoe, Jeff Goldblum, who is in this episode, by the way, and James Woods.
Where's Jeff Goldblum?
His boy, he is one of the radio announcers. He's like uncredited. He's one of the New York radio announcers.
Okay. Who is the Dark Man then?
He's an unknown actor.
Why didn't they get any of those guys?
They chose to because they didn't want you to be like, that's Jeff Goldblum at the time,
Okay. I guess that's good.
So, no, the actor's name is something. Kevin. I don't remember what the guy's. Oh, Jamie Sheridan. Yeah. Relative unknown at the time. So let's talk about Chatzability before we call it here.
Yeah.
This is 6 episodes. 6 of this. No, 4 of this.
It's 4 episodes.
Yep. Do you want to watch those 4?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Do you want to watch it?
Sure.
Yeah.
I want to see this get dumb and post-apocalyptic and weird. I'm going to be disappointed. I've heard it just gets progressively worse and then ends stupidly, but it ends. And some characters in this that I really wanted to see more of are going to get fleshed out. So like Miguel Ferrer's in this briefly as like a robber. He becomes important. Molly Ringwald's boyfriend becomes important. One of the guys that Larry or Larry's girlfriend, I can't remember, one of the like guys that they bump into becomes important. There's like all these like background characters that I'm like, oh, yep. They're all going to do stuff in the war of good and evil.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just curious to see what happens. I mean, I'm a sucker for this whole CRT, 90s TV miniseries thing that it's got going on. The kind of kitsch of it is very fun to me. And I think we could, re-examine and delve more deeply into the COVID stuff. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't know. I want to see it, like you said, I want to see it get stupid. I want to see how stupid it gets.
What's the full extent of this dumb stuff?
Yeah.
I think
exactly.
in the arc of Chatz, we haven't had a good dumb show in a while. So I think that'll be good.
Yeah,
Studio 60 is dumb, but not in the same way at all.
Yeah. I can't think of something we've watched. I can think of movies for commentary chats that we've watched that are dumb in this way, but not a main feed show.
Yeah,
and it rounds out our miniseries season. And it's only 2 episodes, and that seems good to me.
Perfect. Yeah, so 290 minutes per podcast, which should be 2 podcast episodes. Don't need to do a recap. Maybe I'll check out some of the 2021 if I feel like getting Paramount Plus. Probably not. I've heard it's pretty boring and changes things for the worse in most ways. And then we'll read the whole book. No.
No. I'm not even going to pretend to commit to that.
No. Easy.
No, thank you.
Easy in and out conclusion to the Chatz miniseries season. The Stand 1994. It's on YouTube. It couldn't be more accessible for folks.
And I'll cut this out, but we think we know what we want to do for season 12.
Yeah.
And
it's
I think
related.
this actually transitions quite well into that.
I was going to say that. Thank you for saying it in a subtle way. I was trying not to say it in an obvious way. Good job.
Yeah. So I'm going to keep my lips zipped
keep that
besides
in my pocket.
that. But I think once people know what we're watching for season 12, they'll be like, okay.
Oh, you're seeding this idea. Okay.
Kind of flows a little bit.
Yeah. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, folks, that's The Stand 1994. We've been Alan and Magellan. What? Who?
Yep.
Literally,
Good
who
job.
writes these
Good job.
scripts? Do you write
job.
these?
I do.
Okay. What's the next line?
Well, it's me telling folks what's going on the Patreon for this month. So you last week listened to our pilot chats on Frasier, Cheers, and Sequest DSV. So that was pretty fun, wasn't it?
I had fun.
And then next week, we don't know what you've chosen because we haven't done the poll and all this, but you're getting a Chats Nights episode that you voted on. And that's going to be a nice way to round out your April content. And we've got some fun stuff coming in the month of May, so just keep your ears ready. And thank you for being a patron, for supporting the show. We really appreciate it. We love you.
We love you very much. Thank you, everybody. We've been Pilot Chats. Peace.
Good night.
Wear a mask.
Well, there you have it. So, as you probably have started mapping and calendaring out for yourself, we're going to be spending 5 episodes of the show on Vanity Fair. We're going to be watching the Amazon miniseries, and then don't tell anybody this is a surprise, but maybe we'll do the movie. I don't know. We're going to do 3 episodes on Angels in America, and then we're going to be doing 2 episodes at the very end of this season on 1994's The Stand. Maybe we'll watch the recent reboot of it, but that sounds like a big investment for something that's not going to be very good. So probably just 2 episodes. And all of that will take us through to around July, I believe. And then in July, we'll be starting season 12, which we can't wait to share with you. But lots of fun stuff to be discussed in Vanity Fair, Angels in America, and The Stand. So we hope that you join us for those 3 mini seasons. Of course, you can get in touch with the show over at chatspod@gmail.com. You can send your questions, your comments, your feedback. You can request to be on an episode with us. We love having fans and listeners on with us. So we're having omens for the entire season of Vanity Fair. But there's room if you want to come on and discuss Angels in America and The Stand with us. We would gladly have you. You can also follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/chatspod. You can DM us there if you don't have email anymore, but you still have Twitter for some reason. You're like, no, I will not have anything before Twitter or after Twitter. No Instagram, no Facebook, no email, no, you get it, you get the joke. As I said at the beginning of the episode, if you would like to support the show and hear bonus episodes from us, you can do so over at patreon.com/chatspod. We started the month of April with a PilotChatz episode with the shows chosen by Alan, because Alan won this trivia contest episode we did last month. But that PilotChatz, we talked about Sequest, Frasier, and Cheers. And then yesterday, we actually released the full episode of The Stand, PilotChatz. Next Saturday, we're going to be doing a Chatz Nights episode, which is a little more relaxed type of thing. So, chuck us $3 and check those out, and check out a pretty substantial backlog of bonus episodes that I would say at this point numbers maybe like 2/3 the number of main feed episodes we have, something like that. I haven't done the exact math, but it's quite a lot of bonus. It's actually probably less than that, but it's a lot of bonus episodes. We would also love it even if you are not able to support us monetarily, if you could support us by rating and reviewing the show on iTunes. That helps quite a lot. And then if you'd like to follow us doing other maybe not so TV related things, you can go check us out on Twitch, twitch.tv/chatspod. We've been streaming here and there. Usually we're averaging about once a month, maybe twice a month if we're feeling feisty. And we do a mix of things. We do some kind of retro, I guess now it's retro, like GameCube era games. We've done some VR stuff. We've done some Switch stuff. And then we also do things like learning Klingon on Duolingo, or little activities like that also aren't strictly video gaming. So join us there if that sounds fun. And that's all I got for you, folks. We hope to see you join us next week for the very first episode of Vanity Chats and for the rest of the season. Until then, see you later.